Furge, January 13th, 2022, 2:01 a.m., the East Baton Rouge. Parish 911 service receives a call. A woman is on the line. She identifies herself, Lacey Fletcher. My daughter has stopped breathing. The voice is calm, steady. The dispatcher starts the recording and begins asking standard questions. The first thing investigators would later note was the complete absence of panic. The woman reports that her daughter is not breathing, but speaks as if referring to a broken household appliance. Address: a prestigious neighborhood in Baton Rouge. Daughter's age: 36. What happened? She's not breathing. She's just sitting in the living room. The dispatcher asks her to begin CPR. Every second is critical. No, I can't. Why? I just can't. No explanation. The dispatcher insists but receives a categorical refusal. Is Lacey breathing? No. Is she cold to the touch? A long pause. I haven't touched her. The dispatcher clarifies if Lacey had any health problems. Sheila mentions some mobility issues, but phrases it vaguely. When was the last time you saw her conscious? I don't remember exactly. Yesterday, probably. And today? I didn't go in to see her. The mother had not checked on her daughter all day, yet she calls to say she isn't breathing. At 2:09 a.m., paramedics John Martinez and Katie Wilson arrive at the address. A police squad follows. Sheila meets them at the door. Around 50, well-groomed, her face is calm. I'm Sheila, come in. No stress, she simply points the way. Living room, straight ahead. The house is clean. It smells of air freshener. Nothing indicates a problem. Martinez enters the living room. He turns on the light. Lacey Fletcher is sitting on an old brown sofa. Martinez has worked as a paramedic for 12 years, but his experience had not prepared him for this. Lacey isn't just sitting on the sofa. She is inside it. Her body has merged with the furniture, taking the shape of the depression in the upholstery. The skin is covered in multiple old wounds. The hair is matted into a single mass. The smell is such that Wilson recoils. Even through a mask, it is impossible to breathe normally. Martinez checks for a pulse. The skin is cold. No pulse, no breathing. He looks around the room. On the floor are traces of biological fluids. On the table, empty bottles, food wrappers, everything covered in dust. The sofa stands opposite the TV. On a shelf is a game console, a wire stretching to the sofa. The picture is clear. Lacey had been on this sofa not for days, months, perhaps years. Martinez goes out into the hall. Sheila and her husband, Clay, are standing there, calm. Is she gone? Sheila asks in a casual tone. Yes, the police want to ask you questions. 20 minutes later, detectives arrive. Sam Robbins, 17 years in the Crimes Against Persons unit. He enters the living room, turns on additional lighting, takes photos from different angles. For the first time in years of work, his partner steps out of the room to catch his breath. Robbins checks the details. The windows are darkened with special film. The glass hasn't been washed in years. He pulls out a voice recorder. Lacey Fletcher, 36 years old, multiple injuries, signs of prolonged presence in one position, lack of care, duration, likely months or years, process as a crime scene. Robbins goes into the kitchen. Sheila and Clay Fletcher are sitting at the table with coffee. They are talking calmly. A few meters away from them is the room with their daughter in a state that is impossible to describe. But there is neither stress nor grief on their faces. The detective realizes an investigation is beginning into a case that will show how far human indifference can go. A case where the weapon was the absolute ignoring of another person's existence. Sheila and Clay Fletcher are people with irreproachable reputations. Sheila works as an assistant district attorney. 23 years in the justice system, specialization, cases involving the protection of minors. She appears in court, represents the interests of the state, and ensures compliance with the law. Clay is a coordinator at a local nonprofit organization. He manages social support programs. He helps families in difficult situations. Both are active in public life. Sheila serves on the city council, participates in budget planning, attends public hearings. Clay regularly attends church, a Baptist congregation on the outskirts of the city. Detectives pull up their social profiles, photos from events. Sheila at an awards ceremony for prosecutor's office employees. Clay at a charity run. The couple at a Christmas service. Neighbors give testimony. detectives interview everyone living on their street. Quiet people, friendly, never had problems. Keep to themselves, but always say hello. House is always in order, lawn is mowed. Not a single conflict, not a single complaint. Model residents of a model neighborhood. Detective Robbins asks each neighbor the next question. When was the last time you saw their daughter? The first reaction is surprise. Most didn't know the Fletchers had a daughter. I thought they lived alone. In 10 years, I've never seen anyone but them. One neighbor remembers something vaguely. I think there was a girl, a long time ago, 15 years back, maybe more. Then she disappeared. Another clarifies. I asked Sheila once. She said her daughter had moved away, studying somewhere. Detectives check the archives. Lacey Ellen Fletcher, born in 1985. Only daughter of Sheila and Clay. School records exist until 2002. Then, a void. No traces of college enrollment, no employment records, no medical documents, no social contacts. Lacey disappeared from all databases at the age of 17, but she hadn't moved away. She remained in her parents' house all this time. Robbins builds a chronology. 2002, last school records. 2022, discovery. 20 years. For 20 years, Lacey Fletcher was in a house located in a neighborhood where dozens of families live. A house with large windows, a well-kept yard, and regular garbage collection. For 20 years, her parents went to work, attended church, and participated in public life. They returned to this house every evening, and in those 20 years, no one, not neighbors, not colleagues, not church members, asked where their daughter was. Because Sheila and Clay created the perfect picture. They were the kind of people no one questioned, a prosecutor's assistant and a social worker, people who, by definition, look after the well-being of others. Their social status became their best defense. No one could imagine that what was happening behind the door of their house was actually happening. Detective Robbins returns to the kitchen where the Fletchers are sitting. They are still just as calm. The coffee cups are empty. Clay looks out the window. Sheila scrolls through something on her phone. Robbins sits opposite them. He begins asking questions. And from the very first answers, he realizes these people will not deny the facts. They will explain them as if everything that happened was normal. While the Fletchers sit in the kitchen, forensics experts begin their work in the living room. The medical examiner arrives, Dr. Yvonne Barnes, 28 years of practice. She has seen the results of car crashes, fires, and neglected diseases. But when she enters this room, she stops for a few seconds. The first thing they record is Lacey's position on the sofa. She is sitting, but not leaning against the backrest. Her shape literally follows the depression in the upholstery. Her legs are bent, but do not touch the floor. Her hands rest on her knees. Barnes moves closer. She begins a preliminary examination. The skin is covered with 3rd and 4th degree pressure sores. These are not superficial wounds. They are deep tissue lesions reaching the bone, on the buttocks, hips, and back. Some are so old that the edges have closed up with scar tissue. The hair has not been combed in years. It is matted into a dense mass, tangled with bits of fabric from the sofa. The fingernails and toenails are long and curled. They haven't been trimmed for at least several years. Barnes makes notes into a voice recorder. Her voice is steady, professional, but the words are shocking. Multiple pressure sores of varying ages, signs of long-term immobilization, complete lack of basic hygiene. The forensic technicians photograph every detail. They work methodically, zone by zone. The sofa. The upholstery is soaked with biological fluids, urine, feces, blood. The stains go deep into the padding. The springs are deformed under the weight that had been on them for years without movement. Around the sofa, the floor. The carpet is soaked through. Under the carpet, the hardwood has buckled from constant moisture. The boards have darkened and begun to rot. On the coffee table, a meter away from the sofa, signs of presence. Empty water bottles, wrappers from ready-made meals, plastic delivery containers. Everything is covered in a thick layer of dust. A forensic tech picks up one of the wrappers. The date on the stamp is 2019, 3 years ago. The TV opposite the sofa is plugged into the socket. On the remote, fingerprints, not Lacey's. A check will later show. These are Sheila's prints. On the shelf under the TV is a game console. The controller wire stretches toward the sofa. The controller lies next to Lacey, half submerged in the folds of the upholstery. The windows are closed with thick curtains. On the glass is a special darkening film. From the outside, it is impossible to see what is happening inside. The glass hasn't been washed in years. The layer of dirt is so thick that even without curtains, it would be difficult to see anything. The door to the living room has no lock. Anyone could have entered at any moment. Barnes continues the examination. She measures the ambient temperature, checks signs that will help establish the time. Rigor mortis is absent. Livor mortis is weakly expressed due to the specifics of the position. Preliminary assessment. Between 8 and 12 hours have passed. 8 to 12 hours. Sheila called 911 at 2 in the morning. This means Lacey stopped breathing roughly between 2 and 6 in the evening of the previous day. Barnes asks herself the question that the prosecutor will later ask. When exactly did Sheila realize her daughter wasn't breathing? Immediately? An hour later? Several hours later? And why didn't she call right away? The forensics team collects samples. They take swabs from the sofa, the floor, and surrounding surfaces. Everything will be sent to the lab. Robin stands at the entrance to the living room. He looks at this scene. He tries to understand the chronology. Lacey disappeared from all records in 2002. She was 17. Now it's 2022. She's 36. 20 years. Pressure sores of this degree do not appear in months. This is the result of years of immobility. Doctors will say later, at least 10 to 12 years. For 10 to 12 years, Lacey Fletcher did not get up from this sofa. She didn't walk. She didn't move further than an arm's length. For 10 to 12 years, she was in this room while her parents lived their normal lives a few meters away from her. Robbins understands. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a situation that suddenly got out of control. This is the result of systemic, long-term, conscious inaction. And now the task of the investigation is to prove that Sheila and Clay Fletcher knew what was happening and made the choice to do nothing. Forensics experts draft the official protocol. Every detail is recorded precisely, without emotion. A document that will become the basis of the prosecution. Object found in a sitting position on a brown-colored sofa. Identification. Lacey Ellen Fletcher, 36 years old. Technical descriptions follow, but behind the dry wording is a picture that is difficult to process. Lacey is covered in excrement. Layer upon layer. Fresh over old, those over even older ones. For years, no one cleaned, washed, or changed her clothes. She sat in this constantly. Urine soaked the sofa through. The upholstery decomposed from constant contact with biological fluids. The padding turned into a breeding ground for bacteria. The springs rusted through. The pressure sores on the buttocks and thighs are so deep they expose bone tissue. The protocol uses the term full thickness. This means the wounds went through all layers of skin, subcutaneous tissue, and muscles, reaching the bone. Such wounds do not appear quickly. First, the skin reddens. Then, a blister appears. Then, it bursts. Then, necrosis of the superficial layers begins. Then, the deep ones. Each stage takes weeks, months. For a pressure sore to reach the bone, years of continuous pressure on the same spot are required. Insects were found in the wounds, live ones. Flies had laid eggs in the open lesions. Larvae developed there, feeding on necrotic tissue. The protocol records another detail. Lacey's contours had merged with the sofa upholstery. Forensics used the term integration. Her skin literally fused with the fabric from long-term contact and constant moisture. When they later transport her, the sofa will have to be cut. It is impossible to separate Lacey from the furniture without damaging the remains. They have become one. Medical examiner Barnes continues the examination. She checks for signs of other possible causes. There are no signs of forced restraint, no ropes, handcuffs, or belts. Lacey was not tied up. She simply could not move. Barnes examines the limbs. The muscles are completely atrophied. The legs are thin, like those of a person who has been in a coma for years. But Lacey wasn't in a coma. She was conscious. Before the sofa, a TV, a game console, she could see, hear, pick up the controller, but she couldn't stand up. Detective Hall, Robin's partner, checks other rooms in the house. He goes up to the second floor, 3 bedrooms. One is the master, clean, large bed made. The second is a guest room, furniture covered in dust, clearly unused. The third should have been Lacey's room. Hall opens the door. The room is untouched. The bed is made. Posters on the walls, bands from the early 2000s. A shelf with books, school textbooks, a few young adult novels. On the desk, an old computer, a monitor with a cathode ray tube. Everything looks as if Lacey just stepped out and will be right back. But the layer of dust says no one has entered here for years. Hall goes back down, reports to Robbins. He nods. The picture is becoming fuller. Lacey had her own room, a bed, personal space, but at some point she stopped going up there. She stayed in the living room, and she never left the sofa again. Barnes completes the preliminary examination, dictates the conclusions. The cause of death will be established after the autopsy. Preliminarily, multiple factors: sepsis from infected pressure sores, malnutrition, dehydration, renal failure. The exact sequence will be determined by the lab. She pauses, then adds a phrase that will enter all reports. The state of the object indicates a long process of wasting away. At least 10 years of complete immobilization. 10 years. Robbins hears this figure and realizes now he needs to reconstruct the entire chronology. When Lacey sat on that sofa, why she didn't get up, and most importantly, what Sheila and Clay were doing all those years. He returns to the kitchen. The Fletchers are still sitting there, calm. Clay looks out the window. Sheila checks her phone. Robbins sits opposite them, takes out a notebook, turns on the recorder on the table. "I need to ask you a few questions about Lacey." Sheila nods, puts down her phone. "Of course." Her voice is steady, as if the detective is asking about the weather, not about the daughter who was just found in a state that defies description. "When was the last time Lacey left the house?" Sheila thinks. "A long time ago. 12 years ago, probably." 12 years? "Yes, approximately." "Why didn't she go out?" "She had special needs. She didn't want to." Robbins makes a note, continues. "When was the last time Lacey got up from the sofa?" A long pause. Sheila looks at Clay. He remains silent. "Also a long time ago." "How long ago?" "I don't remember exactly." Robbins changes tactics. "Did you realize she had pressure sores?" "Yes." "Did you seek medical attention?" "No." "Why?" "She didn't want to." A simple answer, as if that explains everything. And it is at this moment that Robbins realizes the Fletchers' defense strategy is already ready. They will claim that Lacey chose this lifestyle herself, that they couldn't force her, that they respected her decision. The interrogation continues. Robbins moves to basic questions. How did Lacey eat? How did she manage hygiene? Who looked after her? Sheila answers without pauses, as if recounting an ordinary household routine. "We brought her food. She ate herself. We put the plates on the table next to her." "How often?" "Every day, usually twice." "And water?" "Bottles of water, also on the table." Robbins records every word, continues. "Could Lacey get to the bathroom?" "No, she didn't get up." "How did she manage the toilet?" Sheila makes her first noticeable pause, then she answers. "She managed right there." "On the sofa?" "Yes." "Did you clean up?" "Sometimes." "How often is sometimes?" A shrug. "When it was needed." Robbins looks at Clay. He has been silent the entire conversation, sitting, staring at one point. "Mr. Fletcher, do you agree with what your wife is saying?" Clay slowly nods. "Yes." Nothing more. A one-word answer. Robbins returns to Sheila. "Lacey had pressure sores. You saw them?" "Yes." "When did they appear?" "I don't remember exactly. Gradually." "Did you realize it was serious?" "We thought it was because she wasn't moving." "Did you try to help, treat the wounds, call a doctor?" "We offered. She refused." Again this argument. Lacey refused, as if it relieves the parents of all responsibility. "When was the last time you spoke with Lacey?" "The day before yesterday, or yesterday morning. I don't remember." "What did you talk about?" "Asked how she was feeling. She said fine." Robbins makes a note, returns to the chronology. "When did Lacey stop leaving the house?" "Around 2006, maybe 2007. "She was about 20? "Yes, roughly." "Why did she stop going out?" "She had special needs, social anxiety. She was uncomfortable with people. Was she seeing a psychiatrist? Before, yes, then she refused. When did she stop getting up from the sofa? Sheila thinks longer than usual. 10 years ago, maybe more. And since then, she never got up once. No, she didn't get up for 10 years and you didn't call a doctor? We offered. She didn't want to. A cyclic argument, the same answer every time. The officer standing by the door gives Robbins a sign. The body camera is recording the entire conversation. The recording is already saved. Later, prosecutors will analyze every intonation, every pause. Robbins changes direction. Were you working all these years? Yes, both of us. Who stayed with Lacey? She was alone during the day. We returned in the evening. Every day you went to work, leaving your daughter on the sofa? She was an adult, competent. This word, competent, becomes key. Sheila repeats it several times. Competent. Capable of making decisions. Capable of refusing help. But the forensics team in the next room is recording a very different picture. A person who cannot stand up, cannot get to the bathroom, covered in pressure sores to the bone. This is not competence. This is total helplessness. Robbins asks a direct question. Did you realize Lacey was dying? For the first time, Sheila hesitates. She looks at Clay. He continues to remain silent. We didn't think it was that serious. She had wounds to the bone. How could you not realize? She said she was okay. Robbins puts away the notebook. He looks at this couple. Both well-groomed, calm, clothes clean, hair brushed. Sheila has light makeup on. Clay is wearing a watch, clearly expensive. They look like ordinary middle-class people who were accidentally disturbed late in the evening. Not a trace of shock, not a trace of grief, as if their daughter isn't lying in the next room in a state that forced experienced paramedics to go outside to catch their breath. At that moment, Hall walks into the kitchen. He quietly tells Robbins, "We need to talk." They go out into the hallway. Hall shows photos on a tablet. This is from the second floor. The parents' room, the bathroom. Robbins looks. Everything is perfectly clean. The bed is made. The bathroom sparkles. Towels are neatly hung. And this is the hallway near the living room. The next photo. Also clean. No traces, no smells outside of one room. They clean the whole house, regularly, except for the living room. Robbins understands the significance of this detail. The Fletchers maintained order everywhere. They washed the floors, wiped the dust, did the laundry. But they only entered the room where their daughter was to leave food and water. No cleaning, no hygiene, no help. A conscious decision. Every day, for years. Robbins returns to the kitchen. He sits opposite the Fletchers. "Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, I must inform you now. You are persons of interest in the investigation. I recommend exercising your right to an attorney." Sheila nods, calmly. "Fine, we will call our attorney." They are not surprised, as if they expected this. Robbins stands up, signals to the officers. The Fletchers are not being arrested yet. All evidence must be gathered, but their statements are recorded. Their version is documented. And now the task of the investigation is to take this version apart, piece by piece, and show that behind every "she didn't want to" stands a conscious decision not to help a helpless person. Investigators pull up all available records on Lacey Fletcher. They need to understand how an ordinary young woman ended up on a sofa she didn't get up from for 12 years. Medical records begin from an early age. Lacey was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at age 9, high-functioning autism. She spoke, studied, interacted with others, but had difficulty with social contacts. School records provide more details. Teachers describe her as intelligent but withdrawn, good grades in the exact sciences, difficulties in group activities, preferred to spend time alone. Psychological evaluations from school archives mention social anxiety. Lacey avoided large crowds, rarely participated in extracurricular activities, but she managed the curriculum. The last medical record is dated 2002. Lacey is 17, a routine checkup before high school graduation. The doctor records health in order, weight normal, no physical problems. After that, complete void. 20 years of no doctor visits, no prescriptions, no visits to clinics. Detectives interview school acquaintances. They find a few people who remember Lacey. She was quiet, sat in the corner of the class, hardly talked to anyone. I tried to befriend her, She answered politely, but always kept her distance. After graduation, I never saw her. I thought she moved to another city. No one questioned where she went. People simply assumed that Lacey continued her life elsewhere. Investigators construct a timeline. 2002, Lacey graduates from school, last medical checkup, last records in the education system. 2003, 2006, a blurred period. Neighbors occasionally saw her in the yard, rarely in passing. Then they stopped seeing her entirely. Roughly 2006-2007, Lacey stops leaving the house. According to Sheila, she decided so herself. Spends all her time in the living room. 2010-2011. According to the medical examiner's estimates, it was around this time that Lacey stopped getting up from the sofa. The first pressure sores begin to form. 2022, discovery. 12 years on a sofa. 12 years in one position. 12 years the parents watched their daughter slowly waste away and took no action. Detectives checked the family's phone records. In the last 10 years, not a single call to medical institutions from the Fletcher's home number. Not a single doctor's house call. Not a single purchase of medication using Lacey's insurance. Bank records show regular spending on groceries and household needs. No spending on medical care for Lacey. Lacey's insurance remained active all these years. The Fletchers paid the premiums, but they never once used the coverage. Social services checked their databases. No reports regarding Lacey, no requests for help, no complaints from neighbors or relatives. Detectives find distant relatives, cousins, aunts. They interview them. We hardly talked to Sheila and Clay, saw each other only at funerals and weddings. I asked about Lacey a couple of years ago. Sheila said she lives separately, doing her own thing. They didn't invite us over, always kept to themselves. The Fletchers methodically isolated not only Lacey, but themselves as well. At minimum social contacts, no guests at home, all communication, only at work or in church. Robbins compiles all the data into a single file. The picture becomes clear. Lacey was a vulnerable person. Autism and social anxiety made her dependent on her parents. She could not independently seek help. She could not protect herself. She relied entirely on Sheila and Clay, and they exploited this dependence. Gradually, year after year, they reduced her space. First the house, then one room, then the sofa. And finally, the depression in that sofa, which Lacey physically could not escape. Every stage was a conscious choice. Not to call a doctor, not to treat the wounds, not to change the conditions, just to bring the minimum of food and water so the process would continue slowly. Not a quick murder, a slow wasting away, stretched over years. And all this time, the parents continued their normal lives, working, going to church, keeping the house in order. A few meters away from the room where their daughter was turning into a piece of furniture. January 14th, 2022, the day after the discovery. Detectives set up surveillance on the Fletcher home. Standard procedure in an investigation of this level, they need to record the suspect's behavior. In the morning, Clay goes out into the yard. He takes a lawnmower out of the garage, methodically goes over the entire lot, trims the grass, collects leaves, puts the tools back in the garage. Neighbors watch this. One of them later gives testimony. I saw him mowing the lawn. It was strange. Their daughter died yesterday, and he's doing yard work, as if nothing happened. Sheila is inside the house during this time. Detectives requested her not to leave town, but she is free, not arrested, not detained. At noon, she goes out to the car, gets behind the wheel, drives away. Surveillance records, she goes to work, to the prosecutor's office. Colleagues would later report, Sheila came to the office as usual, turned on the computer, went through papers. To questions about how she was feeling, she answered briefly, "Everything is fine, a little tired." No mention of Lacey, no explanation, a workday like any other. In the evening, both return home, turn on the lights. Through the windows, they are seen, watching TV. An ordinary evening for an ordinary couple. A week passes, the investigation continues. The living room is still sealed, forensics are taking additional samples. But the rest of the house is accessible. The Fletchers live there, sleep in their bedroom, cook in the kitchen, watch TV in the adjacent room. A few meters away from the spot where their daughter spent the last 12 years of her life. Neighbors begin to notice details. Usually they kept to themselves, but now even more so. They don't say hello, quickly walk from the car to the house. They had no visitors. No one came to offer condolences. No black ribbons, no flowers. Detectives check if any funeral is being planned. They call local funeral homes. Not a single order from the Fletchers. Robbins returns to them 3 days later, asks a direct question. "When are you planning Lacey's funeral?" Sheila looks at him calmly. "We haven't decided yet. We need to wait until the investigation finishes its works." A formally logical answer, but something in the intonation is wrong. There is none of the grief that parents should have. Robbins conducts a series of additional interrogations. Each time, the Fletchers answer calmly, methodically. An attorney is present, but they hardly need his help. They don't get nervous, they don't get confused in their testimony. To the question of why they didn't call for help sooner, the answer is always the same. "We cared for her as best we could. She refused help herself." To the question of whether they realized the seriousness of the situation, "We thought we had the situation under control." To the question of how they feel now, it's a tragedy, but we are managing. Cold, detached answers, as if they are talking not about a daughter, but about a stranger. A psychologist brought into the case analyzes the interrogation recordings. Writes in the conclusion, absence of emotional reaction corresponding to the situation, rationalization of their own inaction, shifting responsibility onto the daughter, classic signs of lack of empathy. Detectives compare this with other cases. Usually, when parents lose adult children, even if the relationship was complicated, there is a reaction: shock, grief, guilt, anything. Here, nothing. Absolute calm. Another week passes, the autopsy results are ready. Medical examiner Barnes drafts the official conclusion. Cause of death: septic shock. Infection from multiple pressure sores entered the bloodstream. The body could not cope. Additional factors: malnutrition, dehydration, renal failure. The time required for such conditions to develop: years. Barnes writes a key phrase in the conclusion. The condition is incompatible with the sudden development of events. This is the result of a long process of neglect of basic needs. Neglect. A legal term that will become the basis of the prosecution. Robbins receives the conclusion, reads it, hands it to the prosecutor. Now, there are all the components for filing charges. There is a fact. Lacey died from causes that developed over years. There is evidence. The parents knew about her condition and did not act. There is behavior. After the discovery, they continued life without signs of grief or remorse. The prosecutor makes a decision. Sheila and Clay Fletcher will be arrested on charges of manslaughter by neglect. The autopsy is conducted at the East Baton Rouge Parish Morgue. Dr. Barnes works for several hours, recording every detail. The official conclusion arrives on January 20th, 32 pages. No, the essence boils down to several key points. The immediate cause of death: septic shock. Massive infection in the blood. Source: multiple fourth-degree pressure sores, which became gateways for bacteria. The wounds are so deep that bone tissue is exposed. In several places, osteomyelitis has begun, an infection of the bone itself. This does not develop quickly. This is a process that takes months of constant neglect. Additional factors: malnutrition and dehydration. Lacey's weight: 42 kilograms with a height of 1.70 meters. A critically low indicator. Internal organs show signs of prolonged starvation. Muscles are atrophied. Fat reserves are absent. Kidneys with signs of chronic failure. Analysis of the stomach contents provides a shocking detail. Among the food remains, fragments of foam and sofa fabric. Lacey was eating the padding. This speaks to an extreme degree of hunger, when a person is so desperately in need of food that they begin to eat the inedible. Barnes records, indicates long periods without sufficient nutrition. Toxicological analysis shows no medication, no painkillers, no antibiotics. Lacey received no treatment at all, even when the infection was spreading through her body. Barnes examines the skin in more detail, finds traces of old pressure sores that had partially healed. This means there were moments when the position changed, but rarely. Too rarely. Nails were not trimmed for years, hair matted into a single mass, teeth in poor condition, multiple cavities, broken teeth. No medical help. Barnes constructs a chronology based on the degree of the lesions. First pressure sores, 10 to 12 years ago. Osteomyelitis, at least 2 years ago. Critical malnutrition, the last 6 months. Every stage was reversible. At any stage, medical intervention could have stopped the process. Antibiotics would have handled the infection. Proper nutrition would have restored weight. Wound care would have prevented them from deepening. But nothing was done. Barnes writes the final conclusion. Section, classification. She chooses homicide. Not an accident, not natural causes, homicide. In the justification, the condition is incompatible with adequate care. Multiple lesions developed over years without intervention. Malnutrition indicates insufficient food. The presence of inedible materials in the stomach indicates periods of acute hunger. All factors represent a picture of systemic neglect, leading to an inevitable result. The document is signed and handed to the prosecutor. Now, the investigation has irrefutable proof. Lacey Fletcher didn't just pass away. She was killed, slowly, through total ignoring of her needs. And the killers were the people who were legally responsible for her. The prosecutor brings in an independent expert, Dr. Jeffrey Ryman, a specialist in wounds and long-term care. 30 years of practice, consultant on medical negligence cases. He has given the case materials, photos from the scene, the medical examiner's conclusion, the parent's testimony. Ryman studies everything for several days. Then he provides a written conclusion and agrees to testify in court. His analysis begins with an explanation of the pressure sore formation process. Stage 1, skin redness, occurs after a few hours of constant pressure on one point. Blood flow is disrupted, tissues do not receive oxygen. The skin turns red. At this stage, the process is reversible. It is enough to change the position. Stage 2, blisters. If pressure continues, the top layer of skin begins to peel off. Blisters filled with fluid appear. This takes days or weeks, still reversible with proper care. Stage 3, an open wound. The skin is completely destroyed. The wound reaches the subcutaneous tissue. Fatty tissue is visible. Medical intervention is required. Without treatment, the process deepens. This takes weeks or months. Stage 4, deep lesion. The wound passes through all layers. Skin, fat, muscle, reaches the bone. Bone tissue is visible. Treatment is complex and prolonged. Without intervention, bone infection begins. This takes months or years. Lacey had stage 4 pressure sores, multiple ones, on her buttocks, hips, and back. Ryman explains, for a pressure sore to reach the bone, it's not enough to just lie motionless. You have to lie motionless for years without any care for the wounds. He analyzes the photographs, points to specific details. The edges of the wounds are covered with necrotic tissue, black, dead. This indicates a long-term lack of treatment. Living tissue is not black. In some wounds, traces of bone marrow are visible. This means the infection penetrated inside the bone. Osteomyelitis at such a stage develops for at least a year or two. Ryman makes a key observation. 4th-degree pressure sores are accompanied by intense pain, constant, unbearable. A person cannot not feel this. And the smell, necrotic tissue, infection, pus. All this creates a characteristic smell of decay. Strong, pungent. It is impossible not to notice even through a closed door. The Fletchers claimed they did not realize the seriousness of the situation. But Ryman explains, this is physically impossible. If a person lives in a house where someone with such wounds is located, they know, they see, they smell it. Ignoring such a condition is a conscious choice. Ryman moves on to an analysis of the emaciation. A weight of 42 kilograms at a height of 1.70 meters is a body mass index of 14. Extreme emaciation begins at an index of 16. To reach such a weight, one must be malnourished for months. The body burns fat first, then muscle. Internal organs shrink, immunity drops. At such a weight, a person cannot move independently even if they wanted to. The muscles are too weak. The bones are fragile. The presence of sofa particles in the stomach, Ryman calls critical evidence. This is not an accident. This is a sign of hunger so intense that a person eats everything they can reach. Ryman creates a timeline based on medical data. 10 to 12 years ago, Lacey stops getting up. The first pressure sores begin to form, still reversible. 8 to 10 years ago. The pressure soars deep into the third stage. Medical help is required. 5 to 7 years ago, the wounds reach the bone. Osteomyelitis begins, a critical stage. 2 to 3 years ago, the infection spreads. Emaciation becomes critical. Final months, the body cannot cope. Kidneys fail. Immunity cannot fight the infection. Death is inevitable. Each point on this scale is a moment when medical intervention could have changed the outcome, but nothing was done. Ryman writes a conclusion for the court. The wording is clear. The condition is incompatible with the version of a sudden deterioration. It is the result of years of systemic neglect. The parents could not have been unaware of what was happening. The pain and the smell made the situation obvious to anyone who was in the house. The document becomes part of the prosecution's case. Scientific, irrefutable proof that the Fletchers saw, knew, and consciously did not act for years. Detectives expand the investigation. They need to establish if anyone else knew about Lacey's condition. Maybe there were witnesses who could have intervened but didn't. The first circle, relatives, distant ones, because the Fletchers had practically no close ones. Sheila's cousin Meredith gives testimony. I saw them once every 2 or 3 years, at funerals, weddings, always asked about Lacey. Sheila said she lived separately, somewhere in another state, doing her own thing. You didn't suspect? No, why should I have? Sheila worked in the prosecutor's office, a respected person. I had no reason not to believe her. Clay's brother David tells a similar story. Clay said Lacey prefers to live alone, that she has personality traits, doesn't like socializing. I understood. Some people are more comfortable that way. None of the relatives had been in the Fletchers' home for years. All meetings took place on neutral territory or at other people's homes. The next circle, neighbors. Detectives interview everyone on the street. The woman across the street, Mrs. Collins, has lived there 15 years. I never saw their daughter, didn't even know she existed. They seemed like an ordinary retired couple. The neighbor to the left, Mr. Harris. Once I asked Clay if they had family. He answered briefly. Daughter is an adult, lives separately. Didn't expand on the topic. No one heard screams. No one smelled anything. The living room windows were always closed, curtains drawn. Detectives check mail records. All correspondence addressed to Lacey came to the parents' address. Sheila and Clay picked up the letters. Bank statements, medical insurance, tax notices. Everything went through them. Social services checked their databases. There is not a single report regarding Lacey Fletcher. Not from neighbors, not from relatives, not from random people. The Adult Protective Services System is supposed to check cases of possible neglect. But to start a check, a signal is needed. A phone call, a written complaint, anything. Regarding Lacey, there was no signal. Officially, she was listed as a competent adult living with her parents. No red flags. Detectives check medical institutions within a 50-kilometer radius. Maybe the Fletchers sought help somewhere privately, without insurance. Not a single record in Lacey's name for the last 20 years. They check pharmacies. Maybe they bought medications, bandages, something for wound care. No corresponding purchases on their cards. The church attended by the Fletchers. Detectives talked to the pastor. They came every Sunday, quiet parishioners, participated in services but not in social events. Did they mention their daughter? Never. I didn't even know they had a daughter. Sheila's colleagues from the prosecutor's office give similar testimony. In 23 years of work, she never once mentioned Lacey in conversations. Didn't bring photos, didn't talk about family events. Clay's colleagues from the NGO, the same thing. Professional relationships, minimum personal detail. Detectives pieced together the picture. The Fletchers methodically created an information vacuum around themselves, distanced themselves from relatives, avoided close social ties, invited no one into the house. The isolation was total, intentional, controlled. Robbins analyzes all the collected data. He writes in the report, the suspects consciously hid their daughter's existence from the outside world, created a false impression that she lived separately, avoided situations where someone could discover the truth. This is an important detail for the prosecution. It shows the awareness of the actions. The Fletchers didn't just neglect Lacey, they actively hid that neglect. The prosecutor receives all materials, formulates the charge, second-degree manslaughter. Basis, systematic neglect of care duties, leading to a predictable result. The Fletchers are arrested on February 3, 2022, 3 weeks after Lacey was discovered. Bail is set high, $300,000 each. They post bail, they are released on their own recognizance, and they return to their home once again, where the living room in which their daughter spent the last 12 years of her life is still sealed. The investigation delves into the biographies of Sheila and Clay. They need to understand, were there signs they were capable of this? Maybe missed signals, previous incidents. Detectives pull up all available records. They start with Sheila Mary Fletcher, born in 1963, grew up in Baton Rouge, a stable middle-class family, attended local school, good grades, entered Louisiana State University Law Center, graduated in 1985, got a job at the district attorney's office, started in a junior position, gradually rose, specialized in cases for the protection of minors. The irony is that her job was to protect vulnerable people from neglect, the very cases where parents do not provide basic care, where people suffer from the negligence of loved ones. For 23 years, she represented the state in such cases. She knew all the signs of neglect, knew how to recognize them, understood the legal consequences. And all this time, she had a daughter at home in a state that would have been the main piece of evidence in any of her cases. Detectives check her service history, not a single complaint, not a single grievance. A stable career, positive reviews from colleagues. Clay Richard Fletcher, born in 1961, also a local. Attended the same university as Sheila, but in the Department of Social Work. They met at the university, married in 1984. Lacey was born in 1985. Clay worked in the nonprofit sector, programs to help low-income families, distribution of humanitarian aid, coordination of volunteers. His work was also related to caring for people, helping those who cannot help themselves. Colleagues describe him as a calm, methodical person. No conflicts, no oddities. Financial records show stability. The family's combined income, about $120,000 a year. The house was bought in 1998. The mortgage paid off. There are savings, no debts, no financial problems that could explain the neglect. They had the means for medical help for Lacey. They simply didn't use them. Detectives check criminal history. Not a single arrest, not a single fine, except for a couple of parking tickets. Absolutely clean records. Psychological profiles are requested from consultants. Specialists analyze the Fletcher's behavior during interrogations. Conclusion: lack of empathy, but not clinical psychopathy. Ability to rationalize actions. Skill in maintaining a social mask. One psychologist formulates it this way: they function in society perfectly. They understand social norms and follow them, but only outwardly. Inside the house, where there are no observers, these norms do not exist for them. Detectives note one fact: Sheila worked with cases of neglect. She knew exactly what signs social services look for, what questions investigators ask, what typical cases look like. This knowledge helped her avoid detection. She knew the system from the inside. She understood where the gaps were, how not to arouse suspicion. Lacey's isolation from the outside world, lying to relatives about her living separately, the absence of medical records. All of this was no accident, a deliberate strategy. Robbins finds another detail. In 2015, Sheila was involved in a court case against a mother who failed to provide care for an adult son with a disability. He had bed sores, malnutrition. Sheila served as the prosecutor. She secured a conviction. The woman was found guilty. 7 years later, that same Sheila would stand trial on a similar charge, but in the defendant's chair. The prosecutor uses this fact. It shows that the Fletchers didn't just know what they were doing. They understood it was a crime, and they continued anyway. Their impeccable past becomes an aggravating circumstance, not a mitigating one, because it proves this wasn't ignorance or an inability to understand. It was a conscious choice. People with their education, profession, and social status could not have failed to know the consequences. They simply decided that the rules didn't apply to them, that inside their home, they could do whatever they wanted. February 3rd, 2022. Detectives arrive at the Fletcher home with an arrest warrant. Sheila opens the door. Detective Robbins reads her rights. She listens calmly, without reaction. She puts on her coat, takes her bag. As if she were going to work. Clay is taken next. The same scene, complete calm. No resistance, no emotions. They are taken to the station separately, placed in different interrogation rooms. Sheila's interrogation begins first. Detective Robbins, the prosecutor, and Sheila's lawyer are present. Robbins places a folder with case materials on the table. He begins with a direct question. Mrs. Fletcher, do you understand what you are being accused of? Yes. Do you plead guilty? No, we have done nothing illegal. A calm, confident tone, as if it were a matter of a parking ticket. Robbins opens the folder. He takes out crime scene photographs. He lays them out in front of Sheila. Look at these pictures. This is your daughter. This is the result of 12 years without care. Sheila looks. Her face does not change. No shock, no disgust, nothing. Lacey was an adult. She made her own decisions. Again, this argument. The foundation of the entire defense. Was she competent? Yes. Could she get up from the sofa? A pause. No. Could she walk to the bathroom? No. Could she eat on her own? She could take the food we brought. Could she call a doctor? She had a phone. Robbins makes a note. He asks for clarification. Did Lacey really have a phone? Sheila confirms. An old cell phone sitting on the table next to the sofa. The investigation will check later. The last call from that number was in 2011. The phone had not been used for 11 years. The prosecutor joins the conversation. You worked as an assistant prosecutor. You specialized in neglect cases. You knew the signs of negligence. I knew the law. And you don't think that what happened to Lacey falls under the definition of neglect? We did everything possible. She refused help. Did you offer her medical help? We talked about it. When was the last time? Sheila thinks. I don't remember exactly. A year ago? 5 years? Perhaps a few years ago. The prosecutor takes out the forensic medical report. He reads key fragments: bed sores to the bone, osteomyelitis, emaciation, particles of the sofa in her stomach. Did you see this condition? Yes. And what did you do? We cared for her as best we could. A circular answer, the same one every time. Clay's interrogation in the next room is ongoing simultaneously. Detective Hall asks the same questions. Clay's answers are shorter, but the essence is the same. Lacey was an adult. She decided for herself. They couldn't force her. Hale shows the photographs. Clay looks. His facial expression doesn't change. Did you see this every day? Yes. Did the smell not bother you? A long pause. You get used to it? This phrase will go into all the reports. You get used to it. An admission that the situation had lasted so long that it had become the norm. Both interrogations are recorded on video. Later, the jury will see these recordings. They will see the complete lack of emotion in the parents being shown photographs of their daughter in a state of extreme suffering. The prosecutor formulates the formal charge: second-degree manslaughter, the basis, systemic neglect of duties to care for a dependent person, leading to a predictable and preventable outcome. Sheila and Clay are read the charge. They are asked how they plead. Not guilty. Both answer the same, without hesitation. The judge sets bail, $300,000 each. The Fletchers post bail the same day. They leave the station. A preliminary hearing is scheduled. The trial date is in 6 months. During this time, both sides prepare their arguments. The defense will insist Lacey was competent and had the right to refuse help. The parents respected her choice. The prosecution will prove Lacey was vulnerable, dependent on her parents, and physically unable to protect herself. The parents exploited this vulnerability, created conditions for a slow decline, and actively hid what was happening from the outside world. The case receives wide publicity. Local media publish photos of the Fletchers. They tell the details. The public is shocked. An assistant prosecutor and a social worker are accused of the very crime they fought professionally. The trial begins in August 2022. The East Baton Rouge Parish courtroom is overcrowded. Journalists, local residents, activists, Everyone wants to see how an assistant prosecutor and a social worker will be tried for what they did to their daughter. Sheila and Clay sit at the defense table, formally dressed. Their expressions are calm, as if it were a regular business meeting. The prosecutor starts with key witnesses. The first is forensic pathologist Dr. Yvonne Barnes. She approaches the stand, is sworn in, sits down. The prosecutor asks a question. Dr. Barnes, how many years of practice have you conducted autopsies? 28 years. How many cases have you seen during that time? More than 3,000. How would you describe Lacey Fletcher's condition in comparison with other cases? Barnes pauses. She chooses her words. This is the most severe case of neglect I have seen in my entire career. Absolute silence in the room. The prosecutor asks for clarification. Barnes explains she had seen victims of accidents, fires, and neglected illnesses. But such a degree of long-term systemic disregard for a human being's basic needs, never. The prosecutor shows photographs. He warns the jury. The images are graphic. Some turn away, others look, but their faces grow pale. Barnes comments on each photo. She points out details. Stage 4, bed sores. Signs of osteomyelitis, emaciation. She explains all the medical terms in simple language. These wounds do not appear in weeks or months. They are the result of years without movement, without care, without treatment. The defense tries to challenge. The Fletcher's lawyer asks a question. Could Lacey have refused treatment? Theoretically, yes. But a person in such a state is physically unable to care for themselves. The parents bore a legal obligation to provide care. The next witness is paramedic John Martinez, the one who first entered the living room. He describes that night. Sheila's calm tone over the phone, a clean house, then the living room. I've been working for 12 years. I've seen many tough calls, but nothing prepared me for this. He talks about the smell, about Lacey's condition, about how she had literally fused with the sofa. The prosecutor asks, "How did Mrs. Fletcher react when you left the room?" She asks calmly, "Is she gone?" as if talking about broken equipment. The defense tries to intervene again. The lawyer states that an emotional reaction does not prove guilt. The judge sustains the objection, but the words have already been spoken. The jury has heard them. The third witness is Dr. Jeffrey Ryman, an independent wound care expert. He explains the process of pressure sore formation. He talks about the stages. He emphasizes, every stage is reversible with timely intervention. At any stage, medical help could have stopped the process, but there was no help. The prosecutor presents physical evidence. The sofa, more precisely a part of it, the one into which Lacey had literally grown. The section of the sofa is brought into the room. The smell is still palpable, despite treatment. The jury sees the indentation in the upholstery. They see how the fabric has been deformed by years of constant pressure. A forensic expert explains, the fabric is saturated with biological fluids to a depth of several centimeters. Analysis shows layers of different ages. The deepest ones are more than 10 years old. This is physical proof of the timeline. Lacey was on this sofa not for months, for years. The defense presents its version. The lawyer insists Lacey was competent. She had the right to refuse help. The parents could not force her against her will. But the prosecutor counterattacks. He shows medical reports. A person with such a degree of muscle atrophy physically cannot stand. A person with such emaciation cannot make rational decisions. A person in constant pain from infected wounds needs help, regardless of whether they ask for it or not. The prosecutor's final argument, a comparison with Sheila's profession. For years, she had prosecuted parents for neglect in far less severe cases. She knew the law, she knew the signs, she knew the consequences, and she did the same thing to her own daughter anyway. The trial is in its third week. The prosecution's evidence looks overwhelming. Medical reports, expert testimony, photographs, physical evidence. Everything points to years of systemic neglect. The defense tries to hold its ground. The Fletcher's lawyer insists this was unintentional inaction, not intentional harm. His clients did not want this outcome. They simply did not understand the seriousness of the situation. The prosecutor parries every argument. Sheila Fletcher worked in the prosecutor's office for 23 years. She specialized in neglect cases. She knew exactly what the signs were. She understood the consequences exactly. This is not ignorance. This is intentional disregard. He cites a specific example, a 2015 case where Sheila accused a woman of neglecting her adult son. He had stage 2 bed sores, far less serious than Lacey's. Sheila Fletcher secured a conviction for a condition that doesn't even come close to what her own daughter was in. She knew, she understood. She simply decided that the rules didn't apply to her. The jurors listen attentively. Some take notes. It's visible on their faces. The prosecutor's arguments are convincing. After 3 weeks of hearings, something unexpected happens. The Fletcher's lawyers ask for a break to consult with their clients. The judge gives them 2 days. During those 2 days, the defense holds negotiations with the prosecution. They discuss the possibility of a plea deal. The prosecutor is willing to reduce the charge from second-degree murder to manslaughter, but he demands a guilty plea. The Fletchers refuse to admit guilt directly. They do not want to publicly say, "We are guilty." They offer an alternative, a no-contest position, not contesting the charge. Legally, this is not the same as a guilty plea, but practically, it's very close. A person doesn't say, "I did it," but agrees that the prosecution has enough evidence for a conviction. It's a tactical move. It avoids a direct admission, which is important for potential civil suits. But for a criminal trial, the result is the same. The court can hand down a sentence. The prosecutor agrees. The main thing is to secure punishment. The wording is secondary. Court resumes. The Fletchers stand. The judge reads the charge. He asks how they plead. The lawyer answers for them. "My clients do not contest the charge." In English, "no contest." Whispers in the room. Journalists take notes. This is a de facto admission. The trial ends. The judge sets a sentencing date, 1 month from now. During this time, a pre-sentence report will be prepared on the defendants, along with recommendations for the length of punishment. The Fletchers leave the courtroom. Their faces are just as calm as before. No emotions, no remorse. Journalists try to get a comment. The lawyer speaks briefly. "My clients regret what happened, but they insist they did everything possible in a difficult situation." A formal, cold statement, without specifics, without admission of responsibility. They regret what happened, as if talking about a natural disaster, not the result of their own actions. The prosecutor gives his statement to the press. Justice is moving forward. The Fletchers do not contest that their actions led to a tragic outcome. Now it's the court's job to determine a fair punishment. The public is divided. Some believe that a no-contest plea is cowardice, a refusal to take responsibility. Others say the main thing is that they will be punished. The wording doesn't matter. But for the investigation, it's a victory. The case will not go to a retrial. There will be no appeals on the fact of guilt. The Fletchers effectively agreed that they committed a crime. All that remains is to determine the sentence. The investigation reconstructs a picture of life in the Fletcher home, based on testimony, bank records, and neighbor accounts. It's necessary to understand what this looked like day after day, year after year. Morning. Sheila gets up at 7 o'clock. She showers, gets dressed, puts on makeup. Clay has breakfast in the kitchen, reads the news on a tablet. They talk about their plans for the day, work meetings, bills, household chores. A normal conversation for a normal couple. A few meters from them, behind the living room wall, is Lacey, on the same sofa, in the same position. For several years now, she has been unable to get up, unable to reach the bathroom, unable to call for help loudly enough. Sheila prepares something simple, a sandwich, ready-made food from the fridge. She puts it on a plate, pours water into a bottle. She opens the living room door, enters. The smell hits her face, a mixture of excrement, urine, rotting wounds. But she's used to it. "You get used to it," her words from the interrogation. She puts the plate and bottle on the coffee table next to the sofa. She doesn't look at Lacey, doesn't ask how she's feeling, doesn't check the wounds. She just leaves the food and goes, closes the door, returns to the kitchen, finishes her coffee, grabs her bag, leaves for work. Clay stays home for another hour, watches TV in the next room. Does he hear anything from the living room? Groans of pain, attempts to call out? The investigation won't establish that. But even if he hears, he doesn't react. At 9, he leaves too. The house empties. Lacey is left alone, all day. She cannot get up. She cannot reach further than an arm's length. If the food is on the table, she can take it. If not, she goes without food until evening. The TV is on. She can see the screen. A game console is plugged in. A controller is nearby. Maybe she plays sometimes. Maybe she just stares at the screen. Her only window to the world outside this room. The day drags on. Hours pass. The pain is constant. Bed sores to the bone give no rest. But screaming is useless. No one will hear. No one will come. In the evening, the Fletchers return. They eat dinner in the kitchen, discuss work, watch the news. They go to sleep in their bedroom on the second floor. Maybe before bed, someone stops by to see Lacey, brings more water, takes away dirty dishes, a short visit, no talking, no contact. Then the door closes, the lights go out, night falls. And so it goes every day. 12 years, 4,380 days. Every morning, the same choice. Bring a minimum of food and leave. Don't call a doctor, don't treat the wounds, don't change the conditions. Every evening, the same routine. Come home, have dinner, go to bed. Ignore the smell, ignore the groans, ignore the reality in the next room. The investigation calculates. If Lacey stopped getting up around 2010, 12 years passed before her discovery in 2022. 4,380 days of systematic neglect. This wasn't a one-time crime, not an impulsive act. It was a system, established, regular, unchanging. A system based on absolute indifference to the suffering of another human being. A system where the parents simply decided that their daughter did not deserve basic care, and they stuck to that decision for years, despite the obvious consequences. September 2022. The courtroom is overcrowded again. Sentencing day. Sheila and Clay Fletcher enter the room, dressed formally. Their expressions are just as before, calm, detached. As if this were a formality they simply had to get through. Judge Brian Jackson takes his seat, an elderly judge with 30 years of experience. During his career, he has handed down hundreds of sentences. But this case is special. Before pronouncing the sentence, he reads his statement. He speaks slowly, weighing every word. I have reviewed all the materials in this case. I have examined the evidence, testimony, and medical reports. And I must say, in all my years on the bench, I have never seen a case of more egregious neglect. A pause. Absolute silence in the room. Lacey Fletcher spent the last 12 years of her life in a state of unimaginable suffering. The pain was constant. The wounds went to the bone. She could not get up, could not seek help, and was completely dependent on her parents. The judge looks directly at the Fletchers. And you, having every opportunity to help, chose to do nothing. Every day for 12 years, you saw her condition. You knew about her suffering, and you consciously ignored it. He continues. I find your professions to be particularly aggravating. Mrs. Fletcher, you worked as an assistant prosecutor. You specialized specifically in neglect cases. You knew the law better than most people. Mr. Fletcher, you worked in social services. Your job was to help vulnerable people. The judge pauses. But when it came to your own daughter, you refused to apply the same standards. You created a system where a person slowly withered away while you went on with your normal life. He opens the sentencing document. On the charge of second-degree manslaughter, the court sentences each of you to 40 years in prison. The maximum term for this charge, 40 years, a reaction in the room. Someone nods approvingly, someone whispers. Journalists take notes. The Fletchers do not react. They stand motionless. No emotions on their faces. The judge continues. Given your age and the length of the sentence, you will likely spend the rest of your lives in prison. This is a severe sentence, but it reflects the gravity of what you have done. He closes the folder. Your daughter spent 12 years in a prison created by you. Now, you will spend decades in a prison created by the law. This will not bring Lacey back, but it is justice. The sentence is pronounced. The Fletchers are led from the courtroom. They go quietly, without resistance. An escort leads them to the exit. The prosecutor gives a statement to journalists. Justice has been done. The Fletchers have received their deserved punishment. No one should suffer as Lacey suffered, and no one should go unpunished for such neglect. The Fletchers' lawyers announce their intention to appeal, a standard procedure, but the chances are minimal. The defendants did not contest their guilt. They took a no contest position. The appeal will be considered for months. In the end, the sentence will be slightly reduced to 20 years each. Still, a significant punishment. Sheila Fletcher is 60 years old at the time of sentencing. Clay is 62. Even with the reduced term, they will be in prison until they are 80. It is unlikely they will ever be released. The Lacey Fletcher case is officially closed, but it leaves a mark. In legal practice, it will be used as an example of extreme neglect. In society, as a reminder of how far human indifference can go, even among those who, by duty, are supposed to protect the vulnerable. The house on a quiet street in a prestigious neighborhood of Baton Rouge no longer belongs to the Fletchers. After the parents' arrest, the property passed into the court's management. The living room remained sealed for several months. All physical evidence was seized. The sofa was the last to be removed. It was declared a biohazard material. It was destroyed by a specialized company that handles the disposal of medical waste. The rest of the furniture, personal belongings, and documents, everything was sold off or thrown away. The house was put up for sale. It took a year and a half before a buyer was found. The price was reduced by 40%. Even after renovation and a full replacement of the floors in the living room, few people wanted to live in a place with such a history. Eventually, the house was bought by an investment company. They rented out. New tenants don't always know what happened here. Some find out later and move out. Others stay. Just a house, just walls. The Lacey Fletcher case has become a precedent. It is studied in law schools. It is used in training for social workers. It shows how the system can miss a case of severe neglect when the perpetrators look perfectly respectable. Following this case, Louisiana tightened inspection protocols for adults with disabilities. Now, social services are required to conduct visits even without a complaint if a person has not appeared in medical records for more than 5 years. The changes are late. For Lacey, they mean nothing. But perhaps they will save someone else. Public organizations working with people with autism use this case to raise awareness. They ran campaigns explaining that adults with developmental disabilities often cannot protect themselves. They need external monitoring, even if the parents seem adequate. Lacey's story raised uncomfortable questions. How many more people are living in similar conditions right now? Behind closed doors, in houses that look normal from the outside, neighbors don't suspect a thing. Relatives are unaware. The system doesn't check. There are no statistics. By definition, if the cases are hidden, they cannot be counted. But experts suggest there are more of such situations than it seems. Most are discovered only after a tragic outcome. Lacey Fletcher is buried in the Baton Rouge City Cemetery, a modest headstone, date of birth, date of passing, a short epitaph, rest in peace. Only officials attended the funeral, Detective Robbins, forensic pathologist Barnes, a few journalists. The parents weren't there. They were already in prison. The case is legally closed, but it remains open in another sense, a reminder that the most terrible crimes often happen not on the streets, not in dark alleys, but at home, behind curtained windows, in families that look impeccable. Sheila and Clay Fletcher created a perfect mask. They worked in the justice and social assistance systems, attended church, kept the house in order. Not a single neighbor suspected that a 12-year crime was happening inside. This story shows you cannot judge by the facade. Social status, profession, and outward prosperity do not guarantee humanity. Sometimes, behind the most respectable appearance lies an absolute indifference to suffering, and the question that has no answer remains. How many more people are now in situations similar to the one Lacey was in? How many vulnerable adults live in isolation, dependent on those who have chosen not to help? How many more stories will never be known because there won't be that random 911 call to launch an investigation? The Lacey Fletcher case is not just a crime report. It is a mirror reflecting society's blind spots, places where oversight does not reach, situations that remain invisible until it's too late.